Today I want to explore a concept, to be entrepreneurial. What I've realized is that this word has been basically thrown around so many times in so many contexts that it's kind of really lost its meaning. You think about corporate training, people tell you to be entrepreneurial. You go to school, people tell you that in your team you can be entrepreneurial with your decisions, right? In fact, I personally know business people who starts business who are not entrepreneurial, and I know consultants and bankers who are more entrepreneurial than most of the startup people I know. So what does that actually mean? Before we really look into the idea of a person being entrepreneurial, let's take a closer look into the decision-making process. Your decisions shape who you are. In our lives, when we have options in front of us, we're doing something called local optimization. Let's say I go stand in this circle. This is the data that I know. I look into this data, I think of what's the best possible option forward. I consider it, I consider all options in front of me, I make a choice, multiple choice. I pick the best decision, I make a lot of good decisions, I follow up with it, I become successful in life. That's what everyone tells you to do. Here's the deal. You're getting information that's well known, you're moving to a point that everyone's shooting for. So that's what we call local optimization, even in big companies. And innovative thinkers and entrepreneurs know that there is actually another global optimum out there that we should look for. And this is oftentimes very different from your problem statement, very different from the job that you're told to do. In fact, this is mostly about understanding the need of people, knowing what drives those problem statements that you get. This is when you can become entrepreneurial. But the challenge is you start off with this. So you're standing over here, you're looking around you have a lot of tested data, you have a lot of proven data sets, you have all those big data. Everyone talks about big data these days, and you can analyze however you want. But this is all you see. It's this mountain that you're on, but not the other one. So how do we go there? And if we don't know it, okay, let's say I know that there's a global optimum nearby. Someone told me, maybe I got it from like a customer interview or something, and then I try to get there, and then if you don't know it, you might end up there, you might end up there, you might end up there as well. Now, actually, in fact, in these cases, you're still pretty lucky, because the situation is that you actually found the new mountain to climb on. You get onto this space, you try to learn from your location, learn from what you can learn from that type of solution. This is when entrepreneurs try out new solutions, right? We learn from there, and then we find a way to move up the mountain. So we can climb this way, and eventually we'll get to the top. But in worst case scenarios, you actually end up there. It's definitely possible. That's why a lot of startups fail. That's why entrepreneurs, 5% success rate is a very real thing. So being entrepreneurial with your decision, it's a risk. And accept that as a risk. But at least you know after you jump off this way, you're not going to jump this direction again. So jumping off the cliff, you also still learn something. But to map this out so that you don't just blindly take risks, right? Design thinkers actually have a way to look at it. My background came from Stanford and HPI design thinking. So let's take a look at it with a little bit more structure. Feasibility and viability and desirability. This is the three circles that you will always see for design thinking slides. You will always see this. It's how you interpret them and how you understand them that makes it significant for you and useful for you. Feasible side, first thing, it's about, let's say, a business. It's technologically feasible. So meaning you can actually create such a product. It's not that you're trying to create a hoverboard. Oh wait, hoverboard actually exists now, I think. So let's say you're trying to create a lightsaber, then that doesn't exist. And then the next thing is viability. That we talk about business viability, meaning can you do it in an affordable manner? And then desirability. You need to make things desirable to match the actual customer, to actually meet the need. It's actually applicable in a personal perspective as well. Feasible. What's your capability? Your person, what can you do? What can you do best that others cannot? Viable. What's worth your time? Right? You need to make it sustainable. If you think of a certain job you're going to go for or getting into a relationship, what's sustainable? You don't want to put out too much of what you're capable of. And then desirable. What makes you a desirable person? You see how this circle can actually be applied in products, in jobs, in opportunities, in businesses. So it's how we analyze it. And for us, a lot of times we confuse feasibility with desirability. We think specs. You think about the older generation's PCs, how they market themselves. It's always specs. But Apple came up, created something that's unreasonably expensive, that doesn't have better specs, but people buy them because they're desirable. So this is the understanding of the landscape. And these three independent landscapes actually adds up to form that landscape that I was talking about, wherever you're standing, whatever problem you're trying to solve. So it's important that we try to understand each individual components. And if we think of it from a startup perspective, let's take a look at, let's say, East Coast startups. They have a lot of, in the States, East Coast, we have a lot of technology push startups, meaning you have a technology first, and then you find a market to adopt it. So they basically create a spike in the technologically, in the feasibility playing field. So they create a spike over here. They change the playing field a little bit, and then they figure out a way to create it in a cheap enough manner to match the market, and then you find a market to match that product. So product market fit. That's a technology push startup. Another kind of startup for West Coast, customer need pull startups. We start with the desirability. What are some human needs that are not met? And then we figure out what are the new technologies that have become available, and how can we create a viable business model around it. So you can see that these three things adds up to give us that playing field. Examples of that, Airbnb, right? It's nothing new, but then they have understood the landscape. It's not a new technology, it's a technology that's been there. Facebook as well, LinkedIn as well. But the playing field, probably on the desirability side, because I'll talk about it very soon after, it's about human needs. People start to be more online than they used to be. So that's why, all of a sudden, this playing field changed and they capitalized on opportunity. So that's for a startup. What about yourself? What about your job? What about things that you need to do? Your relationships? How does your playing field look like? What drives it? So to me, to be entrepreneurial is to creatively fulfill needs. To be able to fulfill any needs, you'll need to do the study of viability and feasibility. Make sure you're actually capable of doing so and it's worth your time and money. And eventually, the solution will be meeting a need. Notice that this is about meeting needs, it's not about solving a problem. Because the problem statement that's given to you usually is inspired by needs, but you only see the problem statement. So if you try to come up with a solution for that problem, you're meeting it in a very superficial level. To impress, to be entrepreneurial, to make the next big bang, you probably need to look at needs, be inspired, and go from there. That's why in design thinking we have something called need finding. Literally finding needs. Nothing special about these words. But what is interesting about this though, is that needs are usually not there for you to just understand. You need to go dig. Because, for example, Apple versus Android. You ask people whether they are buying an iPhone, why they are buying an iPhone, and then the answers is always going to be, oh, it got a bigger screen, it's nice UX, and blah, 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 blah. I'll tell you that's all crap, really. They buy iPhone because they want one, and then they give you a reason afterwards. And why do the people buy Android? Because they don't like iPhone, and they go for Android. It's not even about the specs or whatever that comes with it. It's emotions. Then you need to understand those needs behind their decision making before you can, as a product designer, design the next best thing for them. So when we look at needs, we look at it from a couple perspectives. Pain relief, Panadols, wrenches, screwdrivers, something that's functional. And now these days, almost nothing can stay at this level because even screwdrivers start to have nice plastic handles to make you feel comfortable about using it, to make you feel strong when you use it. And you can't really just have Panadol without marketing these days. Panadol comes with marketing to make you trust the brand. So there is the desire aspect of almost everything that you need to think about. So sometimes this is starting to be obsolete. You think about startups. We all used to talk about solving a pain point. But now people ask, how do you make your product desirable? And there's barriers that stops you from delivering your product to other people. For EONIQ, right? This is my startup, we do custom watches. The pain relief side, we have a little bit of that. Well, no one really needs to look at the watch to tell time these days. So what's the pain relief? It's when couples have been dating for 3+ years, you have been giving special gifts, and you have exhausted your ideas for like how many times in a row. I see people laughing. And then it's quite difficult to come up with an impressive gift. So that's when we come in and, haha, we saved the day kind of deal. So that's the pain relief side of things. Desire. Well, the product is desirable. It's a custom mechanical watch with a very affordable price point with quality components. And you think about it, then why aren't we like the biggest company in the world? And there are only 5 players in the market, right? Because of this barrier. The barrier would be if people want to design something, they are not impulse buying. And guess what? Impulse buying apparently is a bigger segment in this e-commerce market. No impulse buying, and for a watch, people don't trust themselves to design something nice. So those are the barriers that we need to understand. We understand our customers' desire and pain relief to move forward. And same thing for a person, same thing in a relationship, same thing in a job. What's your barrier that's stopping others from approaching you? What's the barrier that's stopping others from trusting you? What makes you a desirable person to interact with? All these are very good questions to ask yourself, to explore. Are you meeting the needs of people around you, people you're trying to serve, of your partners, of your superiors? And the next thing is about celebrating ambiguity, because I just told you a lot of things about need, and I'm going to tell you to forget about it. Why? Most of the decisions are made in a subconscious manner. It's emotional, and then you come up with logics afterwards. Like what I told you a little bit earlier about iPhones and Androids. Think Tesla. We can go back to the previous slide. Pain relief, it's not about a car that brings you from point A to point B. You're not getting Tesla for that reason, obviously. Desire, we'll look into that later. Barriers, charging problems, battery issues. Obviously, they figure out a solution to solve it like when they started it, because they knew that was a barrier. So what's the desire? Is it about that acceleration that they claim is going to be such a big selling point? I'm pretty sure no. I don't think anyone flew on a gas for a Tesla. And if someone tells me it's trying to be green, I'll tell you that no. Because if there are so many rich people on this earth that cares about the planet, we'll be living in a much better planet today. So what's the real desire behind it? It takes a really good product manager to basically tell you that emotions matters. It's not the reasons why they buy certain things, it's the emotions behind it. What are the emotions that a Tesla owner has, right? What's that emotion? So make sure you celebrate ambiguity. It's going to be ambiguous. People ask me, okay, need finding. In need finding exercises, we go to a person, we sit down with an in-depth interview, and then it takes us hours at a time to know what one customer really think about. It takes time for you to know another person that you care about. Why do we trust these data points, and how do we balance this with the whole big data analytics that we have been talking about, everyone has been talking about? In fact, I think both should coexist. You use the data to do local optimization. Remember the hill that I told you guys about? When you're standing on a spot, when you're trying to find the next best step to go forward, getting data helps you to move forward in the right direction. But if you're jumping off the cliff to find the next new mountain, you probably really need to live with ambiguity and understand the needs of people. Because that's when you actually can be inspired in where the next global optimum can be. And after you hit the next mountain, back to data gathering, and you'll need to do all this homework as well. You can't really avoid that. No one can avoid any of those 3 things: feasibility, viability, and desirability. And then hopefully you can find a new mountain and climb it. And when you do this enough, it turns into a lifestyle automatically. Because you'll start to be okay with not having all the concrete information in front of you before you make a certain decision, right? You start to be able to take risk, educated risk, I might add. Because after you jump off the cliff a couple of times, you know that jumping off a cliff could be rewarding at times. And after you have tried those things, even if you fail, you have a better context of why you're failing. If you fail, you ended up lower than you were before, you think. But what you actually have gained is a knowledge of that area around you, that you have launched yourself to a new area and explored that new place, and you might have found a new mountain to go for. This takes practice. 10,000 hour rules definitely applies. And if everyone has taught you how to be studying for feasibility and viability in your life in school, in tests we learn all about that, but there's one thing on desirability that we almost never learn in school. You never are tested to understand a person's need. This is our education system's problem. We learn about how to test whether we can do something, whether we have a capability of something, but we never learn how to care about the needs of people around us. Just not in an education system. So how do we learn about that? How do we do it? By practicing. Entrepreneurial lifestyle is about constantly, creatively fulfilling needs. So start by noticing people around you, noticing what they need instead of just trying to think of how you can be the best person. Think about yourself, change the spotlight to someone else. Notice their needs and try to fulfill their needs. You'll be surprised in what you can do. Thank you.